Welcome back to the channel. Every case we cover is based on real events, carefully researched and told with respect for the victims. Today we bring you another unforgettable case. Let's begin. A small beauty salon sits just off a quiet highway in South Carolina. It is closing time on a Monday evening in the summer of 1995. Inside, a 27-year-old hairstylist is sweeping the floor after her last client of the day. She has no idea that in less than an hour she will be dead. A saleswoman walking door to door will pass by this salon twice that evening. The first time she waves at a woman very much alive. The second time she will watch a man jump through a window and run into the dark. Police will arrive within minutes. What they find inside will shock even the most experienced investigators in the county. They will build a case. They will get DNA. They will even get an eyewitness description. And still, the killer will walk free for the next 10 years. He will get married. He will have children. He will live less than 30 minutes from where he left her body. The break, when it finally comes, will not come from a lab or a detective's hunch. It will come from a teenage girl getting an oil change. This is the story of Dana Satterfield and the 10-year hunt for the man who killed her. Before we go any further, if you're new here, consider subscribing. We cover real cold cases just like this one every week. Cases that stayed buried for years before one small detail cracked them open. And if you're already subscribed, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this story reach more people who might never have heard Dana's name otherwise. Now, back to Roebuck, South Carolina. Dana Satterfield was born and raised in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, a region of small towns, tobacco fields, and tight-knit communities where everybody seemed to know everybody else. By the time she was 27, Dana had built a life she was proud of. She owned and ran her own beauty salon, the Roebuck Hair and Tanning Center, just off State Highway 221 in the small town of Roebuck. She was known around town for two things: her talent with a pair of scissors, and her warmth with people. Clients said she remembered small details about their lives: a daughter's wedding, a husband's surgery, a birthday coming up. She made appointments feel like conversations with a friend. Dana was also a mother. She had two young children, Ashley and Brandon, ages 8 and 5. By the summer of 1995, she had recently separated from her husband, Mike Satterfield. Friends described the split as difficult but not violent. There was no restraining order. There were no police reports of abuse, just two people drifting apart. She ran her business almost entirely on her own, cutting hair, managing the books, locking up at night. On the evening of July 31st, 1995, she was doing exactly what she did most weeknights: getting the last customer out the door, cleaning up, getting ready to go home to her kids. She would never make it home. July 31st, 1995 started like any other Monday for Dana. She opened the salon in the morning and worked through a full schedule of clients. At around 6:30 p.m., a door-to-door saleswoman stopped by the salon. Some records identify her as Diane Harris. Other accounts of the case refer to her by the name Shirley. She sold Dana a bottle of cleaning fluid. The two women spoke briefly. Dana was in good spirits, finishing up her day. The saleswoman continued her rounds through the small commercial strip. At 8:11 p.m., she passed the salon again. Through the window, she saw Dana cleaning up inside. She waved. Dana, from what witnesses could tell, waved back. That is the last confirmed sighting of Dana Satterfield alive. At around 8:30 p.m., the saleswoman returned to the area to wait for her ride home. As she stood near the salon, she heard strange noises coming from inside. Then the lights went out. Then she heard a loud crash. A man came flying out of one of the salon's windows and ran. The saleswoman did not know yet what had happened inside, but her instincts told her something was very wrong. She ran toward a nearby liquor store to call for help, and in the process, crossed paths with the same man on the street. Frightened, she changed direction, ran toward the road to flag down a passing driver, and when that failed, sprinted to the nearest house and called 911 from a stranger's phone. A Spartanburg County deputy was dispatched to the salon. He arrived within minutes. Inside the salon, the deputy found Dana Satterfield's body. She was in a back area near the bathroom, suspended just above the floor, a strap from a duffel bag wrapped around her neck. She had been strangled. Her body showed signs of a violent struggle. She was partially undressed. There were bruises on her arms and torso, consistent with a physical assault. Investigators quickly suspected sexual assault as well as murder. The deputy who found her recognized the victim immediately. Roebuck was a small town, and everyone knew Dana Satterfield's salon. Detectives combed the scene that night. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. The cash register was untouched. Robbery was ruled out almost immediately. That left investigators with a much darker theory. Someone had come to that salon that night, specifically for Dana. In the days that followed, Spartanburg County investigators worked the case hard. They processed the crime scene for fingerprints and collected a rape kit for DNA analysis, technology that in 1995 was still a fairly new tool for rural police departments. The lab did find a sample of foreign male DNA, but without a suspect to compare it to, the evidence sat waiting. Detectives brought the saleswoman back in for a formal interview. Working with a sketch artist, she helped build a composite of the man she'd seen jumping from the window. The sketch showed a young white male, somewhere between 18 and 25 years old, roughly 5'6" to 5'9", with a slim to medium build and blonde or light brown hair. Investigators also learned that neighbors near the salon had noticed a blue and white vehicle, possibly a Ford Bronco, driving past multiple times that day, sometimes slowing down near Dana's shop. As is standard in cases like this, detectives looked closely at the people nearest to the victim. That meant Dana's estranged husband, Mike. Mike Satterfield's fingerprint was found on the water heater near where Dana's body was discovered. For a moment, it looked significant, but Mike explained that he had installed that very water heater himself back when he helped Dana set up the salon. Investigators also learned Mike was home the night of the murder with the couple's 2 children, both of whom confirmed his whereabouts. He passed multiple polygraph examinations, including one where he was asked directly whether he had hired someone to kill Dana. He also didn't match the composite sketch. Mike Satterfield was ruled out. That left detectives back at square one, with a DNA sample, a sketch, and a description of a blue and white vehicle, but no name to attach to any of it. Word of the Bronco sighting spread through the investigation, and detectives began tracking down every blue and white Ford Bronco registered in the area. One vehicle stood out. It belonged to a local woman named Mary Ann Vick, who happened to be one of Dana's regular customers. Mary Ann had a 17-year-old son named Jonathan, who was known to drive her Bronco around town. Detectives brought Jonathan Vick in as a person of interest in 1995. He denied any involvement. His fingerprints were compared to prints found at the salon, and they did not match anything recovered from the scene. Without physical evidence tying him to the crime, investigators had nothing solid enough to move forward. Jonathan Vick was set aside, though never fully cleared in detectives' minds. Around this same time, one of Vick's own friends, a young man named Michael Pace, began quietly calling the sheriff's office. He phoned in more than once, anonymously, urging detectives to take a closer look at Jonathan Vick. But an anonymous tip, without a name attached and without evidence to back it up, wasn't enough to build a case. The calls went nowhere. The investigation kept expanding outward, chasing other names, other cars, other theories. None of them held up. Months turned into a year turned into 2. Investigators kept working the file in the background, re-interviewing Dana's clients, chasing down leads that mostly went nowhere. Then came a moment that briefly reignited the case. A tip surfaced from a man in prison who claimed that his own cellmate had once shown him a photograph of Dana Satterfield and hinted that he'd been involved in her death. The cellmate's name was Russell Quinn. Detectives were cautious. Jailhouse tips are notoriously unreliable, but they had to follow it. They put together a photo lineup that included Quinn's picture and showed it to the saleswoman who had seen the man flee the salon. She identified Quinn as the man she'd seen that night. For a moment, investigators believed they finally had their man. Then the DNA results came back. Russell Quinn's DNA did not match the sample recovered from the crime scene. Science doesn't lie, one investigator later said. The team was, in his words, back to square one. Again. That is where the case of Dana Satterfield remained for the next decade. Unsolved. Unresolved. A file in a cabinet, revisited less and less as the years went on. For Dana's daughter, Ashley, who was only 8 years old the night her mother was murdered, those 10 years meant growing up without answers. She turned 9, then 10, then a teenager, always carrying the knowledge that whoever killed her mother was still out there, living an ordinary life. In 2005, a new sheriff took office in Spartanburg County, Chuck Wright. He came in with a simple, blunt philosophy about unsolved murders. In his words, there were no cold cases, only old ones. He had photographs of unsolved homicide victims placed at the front of the sheriff's office, so no one working there could forget them. Dana Satterfield's photo was one of them. Around this same time, an ordinary, unrelated errand set everything in motion. Ashley Satterfield, Dana's daughter, was now 18 years old, and by all accounts she had grown to look strikingly like her mother. She brought her car into a local shop for an oil change. One of the mechanics working that day was a man named Michael Pace, the very same friend of Jonathan Vicks who had made those anonymous calls years earlier. Pace noticed Ashley and asked a co-worker who she was. When he learned she was Dana Satterfield's daughter, something shifted in him. He hadn't even known Dana had a daughter. Seeing her, alive and grown and moving through her own ordinary day, brought the weight of a decade-old secret crashing back down. Pace had known something for 10 years. On the night of the murder back in 1995, Jonathan Vick had given him a ride home. During that drive, Vick had mentioned, almost casually, that he planned to go see Dana that night. Afterward, according to Pace, Vick threatened him, warning him not to tell anyone that he had gone to visit her. Pace had carried that secret for a decade, making only those anonymous, half-hearted calls to the sheriff's office years before. Seeing Ashley face to face changed something. He went to his boss first. Then he went to the police, this time using his real name. With Michael Pace now willing to go on the record, detectives had something they hadn't had in 10 years. A named witness willing to place Jonathan Vick at the scene with a stated motive and a documented threat. Investigators also went back and re-interviewed one of Vick's former girlfriends. She told police about a volatile side of him, a violent temper, threatening behavior, and one particularly chilling moment. She claimed that sometime after the murder, Vick had driven her past Dana's salon and told her that if she didn't listen to him, she would end up like that woman. Detectives now needed one more thing, Jonathan Vick's DNA. But Vick was not easy to find. He had moved more than once over the years, seemingly to stay ahead of a case he knew deep down was never truly closed. He was now a married father in his late 20s, living an outwardly normal life in Greenville, South Carolina. With help from U.S. Marshals, investigators eventually tracked him down and compelled him to provide a DNA sample. The results were unmistakable. Jonathan Vick's DNA matched the sample recovered from Dana Satterfield's body a decade earlier, with a reported probability of roughly 900 million to 1. On October 24, 2005, just over 10 years after Dana's murder, Jonathan Vick was arrested in Greenville and charged with murder, kidnapping, and criminal sexual conduct. Jonathan Vick's trial began in November 2006, more than 11 years after Dana Satterfield's death. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically. The DNA match, Michael Pace's testimony about the night of the murder, and the account from Vick's ex-girlfriend describing his threats and violent temper. The defense had little to work with. Their strongest argument centered on a single pubic hair recovered from Dana's body that did not match Vick's DNA. Prosecutors countered that the crime had taken place in the salon's bathroom, and that Dana's body had been dragged across a floor she used all day, every day, to cut and style the hair of dozens of clients, meaning a stray hair from any number of people could easily have ended up on her body or clothing. After several days of testimony, the case went to the jury. The jury deliberated for less than 20 minutes. They returned a guilty verdict on every count: murder, kidnapping, and criminal sexual conduct. One investigator later described the speed of that verdict as intentional, the jury's way of sending a message. Less time than it takes to watch a sitcom episode, he said, to convey exactly how they felt about what Vick had done. Because Jonathan Vick was 17 years old at the time of the murder, he was not eligible for the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison, with an additional sentence reported at around 60 years. During the proceedings, Vick reportedly stood before the jury in tears, insisting that they had the wrong man and that justice had not truly been done for Dana Satterfield. Jonathan Vick has remained behind bars since his conviction. His time in prison has not been quiet. He has been disciplined more than once for violent incidents behind bars, including an assault on a fellow inmate and a threat made against a corrections officer, incidents that added years onto his sentence. He is currently held at a maximum security facility in South Carolina and will not be eligible for parole until 2035. To this day, Vick maintains his innocence. Investigators have also looked at Vick in connection with other unresolved cases from the years after Dana's murder, including the disappearance of a woman named Heather Sellers, a case that remains unsolved. He was also examined, at one point, in connection with the 2002 disappearance of another young woman, who was later found alive in 2008, clearing him of that particular case. For Ashley Satterfield, the girl who was 8 years old the night her mother was killed, and whose ordinary trip for an oil change ultimately cracked the case wide open, the wound has never fully closed. She has said in the years since that you don't get over losing a parent this way. You simply learn to live with it. She has gone on to become an advocate for other victims' families, drawing on her own decade-long wait for answers to help others navigate the same uncertainty. Dana Satterfield's murder was profiled on Unsolved Mysteries just 2 years after her death, when the case was still wide open and detectives were desperate for any lead. It would take 8 more years, one overlooked friend, one ordinary oil change, and a fresh set of eyes on an old file before the truth finally caught up with the man who left her hanging from a water heater in the salon she built with her own hands. 10 years, one conversation, one decision by a man who could no longer live with what he knew. That's what finally closed the case of Dana Satterfield. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this case, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. We'll see you in the next investigation.